On Wednesdays, we talk stonks, but we haven't done that in a while, so let me rewind a little bit. Welcome to The Beat. I am Austin Ward. That is Jeremy Birmingham. This is The Beat with Austin and Berm. And so if you've watched this show in a different iteration in the past, you know we have a little stock watch, talk about the Buckeyes, and we're going to be doing that to recount and recap what happened in spring football because we haven't done that in a while. But if you've never seen us before, that's also still what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the players that caught our eye, up, down, indifferent, coming out of spring camp. It's been a few weeks removed, but it is the middle of the offseason, and it still feels like a good time to do it because, Berm, we haven't done it.
No, and it's not really been that long since Ohio State played their spring game. It's been, 2.5 weeks? It feels like a lot longer than that because the world has sort of stood still for us, it seems like, in the last month. But, it wasn't that far away. It actually feels like it was just last week that Ohio State won the national championship. So all of this is sort of mush-mashed together. But I'm happy to be back talking about Ohio State football and Ohio State stonks with you, and looking forward to continuing to do that and grow the Austin and Berm show, which I've decided is just going to be dubbed Tabs. Okay. Austin Berm show Tabs. So it's Tabs from now on. Too late.
The first episode, and you're already trying to do this and make it happen. I should have known better.
Tabs. Welcome to Tabs, America.
Really excited to be partnering with 10 TV, 10 TV Plus, and 97.1 The Fan. You're getting this right now, this first episode on 10 TV Plus. There are going to be opportunities to get it on every platform available to you in the future. It has just been a long time since we got to actually work. I'm used to talking about Ohio State football every single day, all year round. So we could have waited until, a point a few weeks down the road and rolled out every single platform at once. But I don't know. I feel like, Berm, we just needed to get some thoughts out.
Yeah, I've been talking to myself. My dogs don't give a crap about Ohio State recruiting, and the dogs don't give a shoot about Ohio State stock watches. Neither does my wife or my daughters. So I'm sort of in a position where I've been talking to myself a lot, which is not altogether foreign for me, but it also does start to feel a little less productive because at some point, even I'm telling myself, shut up. And then I'm like yelling at myself saying, you don't need to answer this. But then I feel like compelled to answer it because I'm talking to myself. That's weird. But either way, we're back. We're talking about sports. 97.1 The Fan, 10 TV, 10 TV Plus are going to be an awesome platform for us to do that with. Excited for the changes in our lives and the changes we get to the Columbus market, and one that we get to now be even more intimately a part of. So very excited for it. And then, the best part for me, I think, is that when we see Adam King at the Horseshoe and other areas of Ohio State sports, we can have him on the show without feeling bad about it, which is nice because we've always enjoyed Adam's presence.
Yeah, we'll have him on some of these shows as well. Looking forward to that, working through all of the logistics of that. If you liked the way that me and Berm covered the team before, good news. We're going to continue to do that. If you liked having morning content, the Beat is going to provide that for you. If you liked instant reactions and snap judgments, perhaps after press conferences, after games, after open practices, we're going to have that too. If you love Berm's recruiting content, you want to hear him talk about some stuff, he's going to do that. If you loved the notebook, if you loved anything else that you may have seen us do in the past, it is our full intention to bring the full catalog to the Austin and Berm channel. So we may still tweak some things and continue to grow and evolve and learn over time. That's sort of how the notebook came to be in existence. So we're going to continue to do that. But if you are returning as previous listeners or watchers, we sincerely appreciate the support, and the stuff that you liked before, we're going to do. If you are new to us here on 10 TV Plus or on 97.1 The Fan, we hope you like it. Give us a shot to show you everything that we got to do. Maybe not every show will be perfect for you. We understand, but we're going to try and provide as much content about Ohio State football 365 days a year as we can, and hopefully you find something out of that you like.
Yeah, that's really the rub. That's the crux of it. We know that everyone who loves Ohio State football has a different style of show that they like, maybe a little different presentation, sometimes a little bit more serious, sometimes a bit off the rails, which I've been known to take things off the rails at times. But we are aiming to find that sweet spot for everyone. And what better way to dive into it for us than to get into the stock watch, because that's where football happens. It's the risers, it's the fallers, it's the movers, it's the shakers. And Ohio State certainly had a big spring, Austin, where guys who didn't really get an opportunity to play a lot last year because Ohio State had 37 draft picks or whatever on their roster. And now you see a bunch of guys in an opportunity, in an opportune moment for them to step up. And we've each picked 3 guys that we think Ohio State fans should be pumped up for heading into the summer. And I think some of them might feel a little bit predictable. Some of them maybe don't. But I'm interested to let you have the first pick. And again, anybody who's watched us previously knows who you are fascinated with. And it's Mylan Graham.
So the last 3 open practices in April, we did not have an opportunity to do snap judgments. And I would have talked about Mylan Graham after every single one of them. And so, because I didn't get to, I'm just going to mention right now, he did something, and I'm going to include the first 2. So we had 5 open practices, first 2 in March, 3 in April, including the spring game. Maybe the spring game was like the quietest Mylan Graham performance out of any of the ones that we saw in spring camp. And it was still pretty darn good. The day before, you had the coaches clinic practice on a Friday morning. It was cold. It was rainy. Hands were freezing. Mylan Graham still made sensational aerial catches, in contested, strong hands. The way he moves around the field is pretty special. And I would say, I can't use the generational term because Jeremiah Smith is on this team, and so is Carnell Tate, and Brandon Ennis has a special skill set as well. So what does it even look like for Mylan Graham's role on Ohio State's roster on the depth chart at wide receiver? I don't know. He's almost certainly, he's got to be the best number 4 wide receiver in the country.
But is he the number 4 receiver on this team? That's the question.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm excited to find that out too. The things that he does in a practice situation are special. And I know that that's not the same thing as a game, and you still have to go out there and prove that. And nothing is given in a Brian Hartline wide receiver room, that you have to go out and earn it. I think there were, moments last year where Mylan Graham, and I'd say, well, it's not just because he wears number 5. He looks like Garrett Wilson, and he would make catches like that one that I'm thinking about in my mind right now, the day before the spring game, elevating contested catch over a cornerback. I'm like, that looks like Garrett Wilson. Okay, Garrett Wilson did it in games. He didn't just do it in practice. So I am getting a little bit ahead of myself, and you know that I usually don't like to do that. But he does have a full year in the program, a full winter as well, practices throughout the season, where you could tell that he was still making an impact on the practice field, just wasn't really able to or even needed to have a role for Ohio State last season. That's different without Emeka Egbuka around. Now, I don't know exactly, how that role is going to transpire. As I've said, I just know that he's really, really darn good.
Yeah, I mean, you see him out there jumping, moving. He looks like Garrett Wilson. Then you see the 49-yard touchdown catch and run in the spring game, and he looked like Chris Olave to me in that moment. So, like, there's a ton of really dynamic traits that Mylan Graham has. But the reason that I still am reluctant to put him in this conversation is because Bryson Rodgers exists. And, we're looking at an Ohio State roster that obviously has a major question at quarterback, has some questions about defensive tackle depth, but wondering about how exactly the carries are going to shake out at tailback. And then it's like, well, but who's the 4th receiver? And I don't know that in a normal college football discussion for any other program in the country, there's going to be much hand-wringing over who wide receiver 4 is. But at Ohio State, that's the way it is, because we've seen Brian Hartline want to get more out of these guys, and Ryan Day talked about it midway through spring camp, like, hey, we need more out of these other guys. And every time we saw Mylan, it looked like he put up more and was doing more. But then there's Bryson Rodgers, and Bryson Rodgers is no slouch. And so the top 3 with Jeremiah Smith and Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis, and then you have Max Clare in there, who Ryan Day, when his last post-spring press conference, was raving about the possibilities of the tight end room and what it could bring. I think it puts Mylan Graham and Bryson Rodgers in a position where they are not going to be handed an important role in this offense. So they're going to have to go out and earn it. And we certainly saw Mylan take the steps this spring, much like we did Bryson Rodgers last spring, to see him start to turn that corner and elevate.
Yeah, it's it's not breaking news just to say that Ohio State has more good wide receivers on the way. And it has been, I think, maybe overlooked how well Brian Hartline has managed that, where that position nationally or in the NFL level has this reputation as being divas and give me the ball immediately. And the fact that you have guys waiting, not just Mylan Graham, but also Brandon Ennis for their opportunity, I think speaks volumes to, the culture that has been established and the development and the proof and everything that Brian Hartline has built there. Linebacker, James Laurinaitis is trying to do the same thing, bro.
Yeah, and that's why my first stock watch nominee, the honor goes to who I've dubbed the Texas Tornado Bro, because he reminds me of one of the Von Erichs from the Iron Claw, or all of the Von Erichs. No, but
they all had similar haircuts.
Similar haircut, and I'm glad that Payton has let the flow come back, because he cut it off, and I was like, whoa, bro, that's not it. But the Texas Tornado Bro, as I'm going to call him from now on, it's a great nickname. This is the beauty of actually designing the overlays and the graphics, is that when things come up in my head, no one can stop me. But what I
didn't
really
have to click on it, and I might not in the future.
Yeah. What I love about Payton Pierce is that he is a traditional, old school, line up in the middle of the defense, run downhill, and smack his face into someone else's face. And what he does is allows Arvell Reese and Sonny Styles to move around, because Ohio State, this new defense, we don't know exactly how new it's going to be. In the spring game, Ohio State had two looks that they put out there the entire spring game, essentially. Payton Pierce gives Ohio State flexibility. And when you're talking about what Brian Hartline's built in the wide receiver room and guys sticking around and waiting their turn, there were a lot of people in Texas trying to make sure that Payton Pierce had an opportunity to transfer this offseason. And by having an opportunity, I mean begging him to leave. And he said no, because he wants to play for James Laurinaitis. He is unequivocally the unquestioned third linebacker on this team. And in a system that we think is going to play primarily two traditional linebackers, maybe that doesn't seem like a wide open opportunity for Payton to get a lot of reps. But if you saw what Arvell Reese did a year ago as the third linebacker, we saw what Cody Simon did 2 years ago as the third linebacker, there's an opportunity here for Payton Pierce to become a fan favorite. And I think he's going to be that guy. And it's not just going to be because of his beautiful haircut. It's going to be because he is a bad dude at linebacker, and he opens things up for other guys, which is why I've got him as stock alert number one for me this spring. Like, boom, boom, boom. That's the guy. And coaches just love the kid. Like, he's a really, really awesome young person. And Ohio State fans should be stoked that Payton Pierce did not leave for the, Texas lures that were out there. I'm trying to be polite, but I think it's dirty. I think college football is dirty.
You do. When you talk about, though, opening up things and Ohio State primarily playing with two linebackers, it felt like throughout camp that the opportunity to play three linebackers on the field was like more on the table than it had been in the previous regime. I don't know what Matt Patricia's scheme is going to look like. I don't know what James Laurinaitis is going to cook up, how that impacts the defensive line rotation, but it has felt like some of the flexibility comes by if you put Payton Pierce on the field. Then you have two additional chess pieces, Sonny Styles with more of the, secondary background, but Arvell Reese, who has trained with that defensive front and the rushman to rush, move around and get after the passer. It's like you could see these three guys on the field together at the same time, but it may not mean necessarily that they're all three playing linebacker. No,
and that's what Ohio State's defense right now is about. We are still sort of in the let's wait and see what Matt Patricia brings out. I was having a conversation with a 2027 linebacker in Cincinnati, Antoine Higgins, the other day, and he was asking, he was saying that one of the things that he's really looking forward to seeing is how the Ohio State defense continues to evolve and how it uses the linebackers. And what Payton does is allows Sonny and Arvell to come down to the edge and maybe be more of an edge rusher in the mold of CJ Hicks right now, who is your second choice on the stock watch, because CJ has already made that move full-time from linebacker to the edge spot. But what Payton Pierce allows is for Arvell and Sonny, who are also getting reps doing that in practice, to get more versed at it and let you just stick the stickler in the middle. And that's what Payton Pierce is. So it does open the door for other players. And I think Payton Pierce is one of the reasons why CJ Hicks has had his role pushed down closer to the line of scrimmage.
Well, I think he's made it clear that he wanted that opportunity. And I think you and I have both talked about how much he deserved it and probably that he was a great fit for it. CJ Hicks playing on the edge, I think is a huge deal for Ohio State. And not just like for him, where I think that unlocks more of his potential and what he does best, which you've seen him blitz the quarterback. And when you ask him to go do something and run in a straight line at somebody, he's going to run through them and take them to the ground, or they'll explode. I guess I don't know how that would actually work in reality, but he is awesome at that. He is fast. The athleticism that we've talked about since he was a 5-star recruit, like none of that has vanished. I think he just kind of, it felt to me from the outside looking in like he was floundering a little bit in a role. Like it wasn't natural for him at outside linebacker. He's trying to learn it. There were just plays that weren't showing off, I think, his upside. He looked flat-footed. And to say that about CJ Hicks just feels like it doesn't compute in my brain because he is such a gifted athlete. So I think this move is good for him, but it's also good for a defense that wants to be multiple and versatile and flexible because CJ Hicks can do a number of different things. When Ryan Day is spending time in a press conference saying, well, part of playing offensive tackle at Ohio State is being able to block CJ Hicks. Well, that's not an accident that he says that. That tells you how well he's doing at that part of it. If I have to add a caveat, which I should, we're doing a proper stock evaluation. I think there were a lot of practices where you saw him with Matt Patricia and Larry Johnson afterwards, like going over, well, you're going to have to be able to stop the run and hold up against these blocks and do this and do that. But I felt like watching him do this after some of these open practices or some of the availability days, that there was like a rejuvenation, revitalization of CJ Hicks, where it's like, oh, I'm excited to learn this. And I know what it's going to do for me. And he has always been one of the last people to leave the practice field. He's always been one of the most outgoing personalities. There had been times in the last 2 years where it's like the smile didn't seem to come as naturally. And I know that, when we get into the feelings ball, that's not always a big hit, and it doesn't always mean everything. But when you see the smile back, when you see the communication with the coaching staff, the techniques that he's then taking and spending 30 more minutes after a practice in March or April, learning that. Ryan Day actually said that CJ Hicks was in there, a week ago, 8 days ago, after his press conference, said, well, just saw CJ Hicks out there in the Woody getting some extra work in. I just feel like he knows that the clock is ticking, but he's also in a spot where the opportunity is in front of him, and it's up to him to seize it. And it certainly feels like he's going to.
Yeah, there's this weird catch-22 that's happened in college football, and especially at Ohio State in the last years, where we regularly hear, well, this guy's not ready to go because he's not a complete linebacker. He's not a complete tight end. He's not like, what's wrong with being specialized in one area? You know what I mean? Like at some point in the ever-changing game of football, having a guy who's just an unblockable monster as an edge rusher is actually a pretty good thing. And so maybe we need to stop worrying that much about how, and this is a conversation tied into other stuff we've always talked about young guys getting playing time because as they continue to grow into who they are going to be long-term. In the short term, if they find a way that they can contribute and help the program, then put them on the field. And CJ Hicks, as athletic as he is, and I would contend that CJ is probably one of the top 5 or 6 complete, well-rounded athletes on the Ohio State football roster. When CJ started playing high school football, he's playing cornerback, and then they moved him to nickel, and then they moved him to safety, and then they moved him to linebacker, and he was returning kicks and playing running back. It was never a situation where CJ Hicks was like, well, he is exactly what a high school linebacker is supposed to be. He is an athlete who needs an avenue to go out and destroy people. And if you line him up at defensive end, whether he's got his hand in the dirt or he's just a stand-up edge rusher, I don't care. What I know is that we saw multiple practices this spring where Phillip Daniels, the incoming transfer tackle from Minnesota, had to run laps because he was so mad at CJ Hicks that he ended up having to throw punches and had to run some laps to cool down. So CJ is one of those guys that if you just let him do what he's going to do best, I don't care if it's 8 snaps a game or 20 snaps a game. Like, it's going to depend on the week, I think, for Ohio State, but it's clear that Matt Patricia loves what he can bring. It's clear Ryan Day has seen a re-energized and reinvigorated version of CJ Hicks. And this is a kid who, for all intents and purposes, I mean, he's Captain Buckeye. Like he he never wanted to go somewhere else. He's just looking for a way that Ohio State could use him the best. And some of that, I think, has just been a disservice of saying, well, he's not a great off the ball linebacker. Okay, great. Who cares? Like, you've got great off the ball linebackers. Play those guys in those roles and let CJ go out and be a demon. And he's on his way to doing that. And the way that the offensive line talks about him, the way that Matt Patricia and Larry Johnson have discussed him and Ryan Day, clearly the light is on. The question is, how much do you use that light this year? And is it enough for him to make a mark and move on to the NFL because of that unbelievable upside and potential he has? That's just, I think that opportunity is there for him.
Yeah. And sometimes it's a disservice to say that it's just about the player specifically. I mean, I think when we talk about Payton Pierce and James Laurinaitis enhancing the recruiting and the depth and the roster for linebacker, 2 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. Could Ohio State have let him play on the edge then? It didn't have the same need on the defensive line, and it also had a more pressing concern at linebacker. So some of this wasn't just about the player. Some of it is about the program as a whole. So I think that's worth mentioning as well. This one, I think you've been on the leading edge. If we're talking about tackles needing to be able to stand up and handle championship pressure, I think 4 months ago, we weren't really talking about Austin Siereveld playing tackle at all. And now I think I'm going to steal your stock and say he's probably the starting right tackle.
I mean, he's a starter somewhere, right? That's what Ryan Day said last Tuesday in his final post-spring press conference. Austin Siereveld is going to be a starter, period. He didn't say where. Now, that could still be at right guard. That still could be at right tackle. We'll see. I think that what we've noticed and what we've picked up on from Austin Siereveld is that this is just a guy who's done everything right. He's an Iron Buckeye now. He's a leader of the team. Like, I promise you, if you had ever spoken to Austin Siereveld coming out of high school, that is not what you would have anticipated, him being like a leader, like a vocal leader of this team. He's still not a guy that's the rah-rah guy, but he busts his ass, pardon my language, and a guy that people are going to see continue to get better. And as you look back at the Justin Fry era of Ohio State offensive line recruiting, Austin Siereveld was sort of a throw-in in the class where Luke Montgomery and Josh Padilla were in, and nobody really knew what to expect out of Austin. And he has just been an absolute revelation for Ohio State. And now, again, you have a locked-in starter on the offensive line at a spot where we thought maybe you could see 4 different guys rotating around on the offensive line around Carson Hinsman. And now you've got Siereveld locked in at one of those spots. So the question is it going to be a tackle? Are him and Phillip Daniels competing there? Is he going to compete at guard and take the spot of Tegra Shabola or Luke Montgomery? So we know he's a starter. We know he's a leader. Group that is replacing so many weapons on the offensive side of the ball, so many entrenched veterans, like having a guy like Austin Siereveld who has stepped up and become a consistent driving force in the offensive line room and the offense in general is huge. And the kid deserves all the credit in the world.
I thought it was great to talk to him during spring. I was like, Austin, I want to say this in the most respectful way. When the Iron Buckeyes are out and we're seeing Jeremiah Smith and Sonny Styles, it's like, yeah, of course. And then the third one, and they only named 3, is Austin Siereveld. I'm like, were you surprised by that? And he was kind of like, well, on the one hand, yes, when you're talking about those other guys and the name recognition. And on the other hand, he knew how hard he was working and he knew the impact he was having with the offensive line group and the way that they were handling things in the weight room. So it's like he kind of knows that not everybody expected this of him. And I wonder, I guess the next thing that we got to ask is like, did you actually think that this would be the career trajectory for you? Because you said you didn't feel that way at that time. And I don't know of anyone who's been like a more vocal proponent of Austin Siereveld than you. So like, I guess that's something else that we need to follow up with him on. It's like, you know that you've earned this part, but did you think it would happen on this schedule?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it happened ahead of schedule for him for sure. I mean, a year ago, we were hearing from sources at the Woody like, hey, watch out for Austin Siereveld now. Don't sleep on this kid. And, he doesn't look like a Paris Johnson type of offensive tackle, but he looks like an NFL offensive tackle to me. I mean, if you see a guy who's 6'5.5", 320 pounds, long arms and thickest calves you've ever seen, normally he's got thick calves, but still has skinny ankles. And everyone knows how important that is. And he's just a dude, man. Like Austin Siereveld is, it's it's a beautiful throwback to the old way of offensive line play. Like, I'm not going to talk. I'm just going to go out there. I'm going to rub your face in the dirt. I'm going to leave with blood pouring down my face, and I'm going to look like I'm 60.
But he is a good talker, though. So I'm hoping that we
kid.
get to hear from him more. We was not really until the Rose Bowl, I think, that we had him on the Notebook, which was exciting. If I'm talking about stocks and I'm comparing it to March going into camp, I think you and I had a conversation about this position, and it's, well, James Peoples, with so much excitement coming out of last year, getting a taste of experience, it's like he has to be the leader of this group. And I paired that knowledge with, watching some film of CJ Donaldson at West Virginia, and it was like, this just looks like a complimentary back. He's much larger. He looks like a fullback, a short yardage guy. Like, this sort of fits in line with what I'm thinking. James Peoples is the primary guy, and then you supplement that with some carries off the bench with CJ Donaldson. And then Carlos Lachlan, we talked with him on a different series, and he was like, you guys might want to tap the brakes on this a little bit. I'm not sure that you're giving CJ Donaldson enough credit. And so even with that in the back of my mind going into camp, it's like, I still feel the same way, even after Carlos Lachlan said you shouldn't think that. So I guess I was wrong, because I watched a different version of CJ Donaldson in those 5 open practices in March and April. He lost 25 pounds. He was running, he said, like, back at the kind of speed that he ran track in high school. I didn't know that because it didn't really show up on the carries he's got. He's a veteran guy. He's experienced. He's played big time college football, but then he almost like snapped his fingers and completely remade his body and potentially his career. And now I left April not down on James Peoples, but like certainly stock up much higher on CJ Donaldson. And I do feel like now that there is a legitimate opportunity for those two guys to share the workload in the same way that Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson did a year ago. Do I think that they are both NFL draft ready guys at this point, and like with multiple years of experience at the Ohio State level, at the SEC level, the way that those two backs did a year ago for Ohio State? No, I'm not. I'm going to have to, wait a little bit more on that. But at least in the terms of the way Ohio State manages the backfield and the workload, I can see that being similar now. Now it's up to the Peoples and Donaldson now to take the next step and deliver once they get that opportunity. But I definitely way underestimated CJ Donaldson in March, and I'm not going to do that in May.
He said he was running like the Flash, right? That's what he said in spring. Yeah. I'm not sure about that exactly, because he certainly looks faster than I anticipated him looking, but I still don't. I mean, still not Travion Henderson. But what is interesting to me is that the roles here seem like they're pretty clear cut. And CJ Donaldson is a former high school wide receiver, and he's built like a H-back type tight end. And I think that because James Peoples is still learning that side of the game, the pass catching side of the game, I think that there is a situation where you could see CJ Donaldson used more in the way that Travion Henderson was, in that Travion played bigger than he was, obviously, as a pass blocker, as a run protector, as a guy who was in the backfield putting people on their butts. We haven't seen that out of CJ yet, but he's got that size. He's got that strength, you would think, to be able to do that. But then he also has the pass catching side of the game that maybe James does not have yet. And I actually believe that Peoples will be the person most helped by CJ Donaldson's growth, because the conversation around James Peoples at the end of spring was decidedly different than the conversation around James Peoples at the start of spring, which was James Peoples' talk in pre-spring was, don't forget about CJ Donaldson. Don't forget about CJ Donaldson. And now the James Peoples talk is, well, something lit a fire under him. He looks like the guy we thought he was going to be. So now you got two of them. And then you add in Bo Jackson, and then you add in Sam Williams-Dixon, who started to turn the corner a little bit in spring. And then you get Turbo Rogers, who is going to be a return guy, and it's added to this roster in the next 3 weeks. And then Isaiah West back healthy, and all of a sudden, bam, boom, bing, you've got a 6-man running back room instead of the 2-man running back room that Carlos Lachlan had when he took over for Ohio State. So really an important player in the big picture of things, but we maybe did not talk about enough during the winter, because we were in the middle of the playoff run for Ohio State. Now, I don't think we talked, I mean, we've said this before on other shows, that I don't think we talked nearly enough about Max Clare, about the transfers that came in for Ohio State. But CJ Donaldson is going to make himself a lot of money playing at Ohio State.
Well, you could have talked about some of those other players, but instead you decided to do this.
I can't help it. I can't help it. We can't have this show. We can't do a stock watch without talking about Arvell Reese, because I'm gonna make a bold prediction here if I can, because it's the first day of the beat, Austin and Berm tabs. I think Arvell Reese will be the second Ohio State player drafted in next year.
Wow.
That's what I think. I think he is the second best player on this defense. And it's only number 2 because Caleb Downs, like Jeremiah Smith, isn't from this planet, and so he doesn't really count. So amongst the terrestrials, I think Arvell Reese is player number 1 on the Ohio State defense. He is the guy that can single-handedly do what like Jerome Baker and Darren Lee used to do and make people regret going over the middle against Ohio State. There has never been a player in my time covering Ohio State that I've covered in recruiting to Ohio State who has surprised me more than what Arvell Reese has become. And the fact that he's done it while splitting time between multiple positions as a freshman, moving from linebacker to defensive end and back, the fact that he did it with missing like 8 weeks in his first year after a concussion from knocking the hell out of somebody on a kick return in one of his first games, when you're like, oh, that guy, I'm surprised he's even out there. And then all of a sudden he's like a bullet train down the field and exploding a human being on coverage. Like, he is like, buy all the stock you can in Arvell Reese. Bottom line.
It's a good idea. But we also have more stock watches ahead of us because the off season is long, although we're already into May. Feels like it'll be over in a snap. But the beat will be along every single day, Monday through Friday, to cover all of that. So Wednesdays will be stocks. Thursday, we try to rattle off 3 things when we get to a Thursday. And that could very well be about the quarterbacks because there's 3 of them on Ohio State's roster. And we haven't talked about that coming out of spring camp. And this is also a much longer episode of The Beat than we normally do. You can tell that it's been a while since we've had a chance to talk, and we're really thankful that we've had one opportunity to do that with you all. Thanks to 10TV, 10TV Plus, The Fan, and everybody who's been waiting and asking when we were going to be back out here to talk about the Buckeyes. Glad to do it. Thanks to Berm. I'm Austin. This has been The Beat with Austin and Berm. We'll see you later.